Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Board Gaming Doctor. My name is Phil, and I'll be your board game doctor today. In this episode, I go over my first impressions of Luthier, the art of the instrument, designed by Dave Beck and Abe Burson, art by Vincent Dutray, developed and published by Paverson Games. If you see that this publisher and the designers sound familiar, if they look familiar, they are a part of the team who made Distilled, and that was they probably have a few other games under their belt, but that has been the most successful to date. And so this is kind of a follow-up to that, and I believe that this game is still in Kickstarter at the time of this recording. So, as usual, I'm going to go over my highlights, what makes this game feel unique mechanically and thematically, as well as going over game comparisons and peer review, and ultimately my first impressions. And this is the example of the game at the end of a solo game where you play against a bot and set it up for two players here. And so as you can see, I did not do very well against the AI. I was definitely learning how to play this game along the way. However, I do understand how this game plays now, and let's talk about some of the highlights here and how this game actually plays. So this game is split up into 6 rounds, and you split each round into a couple of phases. You first have the planning phase, which features the worker placement and bidding kind of mesh together. And so this is what I mean by that. You start the game not with all of these tokens, but with a few of these. And they each have a number representing their strength and their ability. You place these tokens onto different spots, either on your own tableau or on the main board, and other opponents may play their tokens there as well. The stipulation is that you play them face down, and other opponents will play them face down as well. And then after everyone has placed workers, you move to the sort workers phase, and I'll show you. By the way, this mod on Tabletop Simulator is fantastic, and so this is probably the best and well scripted mod that I've ever seen on this platform. But anyway, on the resolution phase, based off of turn order, you choose an area, one of the 5 areas here on the board. You either can go to the market and trade in money for resources there, or you can activate workers that you've placed on your tableau. But if you are placing them on or taking the workers from the main board, you can sort them here, or however you can in real life. And whoever has the highest bid at that spot takes that action first. And so based off of player turn order, the order in which you want to activate your workers may be different depending on the decisions others make during the what is called the resolution phase. Then there's an upkeep phase, and you kind of go from there. But overall, in this game, you are trying to, as luthiers or as instrument makers, you are trying to acquire patrons to your tableau, to make instruments for them, to repair instruments for them, but also to help them perform in order to gain prestige and points, as well as meet personal and public objectives for extra points as well. You have some track advancement as well, depending on some of these areas that you interact with. And you also have a sort of area control type of experience going on in the middle of the board, where you can vie for the first chair for each of these instruments. If you do so, particularly building instruments rather than repairing or performing with them, you can oust out other players' tokens, gaining the benefits that are shown underneath, as well as earning more points at the end of the game than perhaps other opponents would. So that's the gist of this game. Now, comparing this game to others, the first game that I want to compare this to is Distilled, the other game by Paverson that has received a lot of notoriety and success. I feel like their approach with Distilled was very much a blended experience of mechanism and theme, where in Distilled you would flip over cards and, kind of using a push your luck type of experience, try to hopefully brew the right beers and the right combinations of cards to do so in order to make the best batch. And that really fit with the theme. I take their word for how the process of beer is made. So that was fantastic in and of itself. And in this game, I feel like the theme is coming through a little bit. I will say that it's perhaps not as apparent as it is in Distilled through its mechanisms, because this game is more focused on the worker placement, the bidding sort of action, and mechanical approach to how you play this game. But there are little areas in this game where there are some uh, theme that does shine through. For example, with the patrons that you have here, they do represent real people in real life. And I think I read in the rule book that they tried to mirror what these performers and composers would prefer, as far as the instruments and the types of music that they would create, as well as the rewards that they would give. And so I thought that was a pretty neat approach to the mechanisms of this game. And there are some other areas that this game likes to, or approaches the thematic integration, such as with the performances. As you note here, you have different tiers of how well a performance might go, and that is all decided based off of dice. There are ways to mitigate the dice and re-roll them, and also to substitute the base dice with better ones as you advance on tracks, etc., and play different cards. But as in real life, performances may not go according to plan, or may not substantiate the quality that you were looking for. But some performances may just be totally right for, all accounting for all the variables that go into a performance. And perhaps if that does happen, you gain a lot more of the reward for that. And so I thought that was a nice touch, even though there is a little bit of dice rolling and luck introduced to this Euro game. I think it was done pretty tastefully. Moving on to some other games that share some comparisons here, mostly with theme, I want to talk about games that utilize worker placement intertwined with bidding, like Rurik Dawn of Kiev. This is a game that I played a while ago. I believe it was a 2019 release. And that game feels very much similar to what is going on here if you strip away the theme of both games and just look at the mechanisms behind them. Both games offer a bidding/worker placement style of approach to the way that you take actions in the game. And so, the same approach, really, even with some area control mechanisms in place too. I think there was a lot more similarities than perhaps meets the eye between those two games. But I also thought of games like Luthier, which is mostly focused on the bidding aspect, but also introduces the mechanism of having increasing abilities to bid higher throughout the game. In Luthier, you can purchase better tokens to bid with, and which are represented in coins, as you go along in the game, whereas here you automatically gain extra workers that are stronger, but also have the ability to hire apprentices, which can up the value of each of these bidding tokens in their respective spots when you bid with them. So that was a nice touch there that reminded me of that game. Viticulture also strikes a comparison, particularly with the way that these bidding tokens can have, or workers rather, that you can acquire in the game that have special actions, unique and asymmetric abilities associated with them if you advance enough in the respective tracks for these. And so you can acquire workers that will give you some abilities that are unique from other players, and create some efficiencies that are really nice in the game. Finally, the last game that I can compare, last two games that I can compare this to, are Uwe Rosenberg's At the Gates of Loyang, where the patron mechanism is very reminiscent of that game, where each of these patrons have a patience track that is tracked, and I'll show an example here. If you place them onto your board, they, as the rounds go by, have their patience tracker move closer towards the end at the right. You do gain resources along the way, but if they do happen to not have all of their requirements fulfilled by the end of, or by the time that this marker has gone fully to the right, they are impatient, and they won't wait for your services anymore, and they leave, and you lose points based off of that. So very similar to how Loyang works with the patrons and the customers that you have in that game, where they do have a tracker for essentially a timer for how quickly you can fulfill their needs, and if they don't, then they go away and you lose money. Another game that this reminds me of is Glass Road by Rosenberg, where the fact that you can bid with workers and have someone else choose a certain worker placement spot to resolve first before you have a chance or any say to do so is reminiscent to the fact that in Glass Road, if someone plays a card from their hand that you have selected as well during that round, you have to play that perhaps out of order, out of the intended order that you had wished to place it in. And so it creates a space where you have to really think about the possibilities of the order in which you place your workers and being okay with the fact that perhaps one area of the worker placement board is activated before another, and if you can mitigate for that risk of someone else choosing it based off of turn order, which adds a lot of decision space to this game. Since this is a Kickstarter for peer review, the comments are few and far between, but most of them are very positive about this game. It's a really brilliant worker placement / bidding system that is utilized in this game, combined with traditional Euro-style mechanisms that allows for a lot of interaction that you don't see in a drier Euro, per se, with the interaction of the bidding and activating each worker placement section. And if you have placed workers, like I've mentioned before, that kind of interaction feels unique in this space of Euro games. In addition to the kind of the ease of play, really playing a round or so of this game really gets you into what this game is all about, and it's easy to strategize after that. There's not a lot of rules burden. And thematically, I guess the thematic integration is really good as well, but this theme of creating instruments is somewhat unique as well. You think of games like Lacrimosa from last year that sort of tie into what is going on here. And so we're starting to see a lot more of these types of games come to fruition. And for those who do enjoy the kind of classical setting of music and creation of music, this game feels very nice to play and is a great representation of that theme. So for my first impressions, first I do want to mention the AI and how that works. It's pretty straightforward if you take the time to learn it. It's not as daunting as it may seem, where you have a deck of cards that you play in front of you, and they're shuffled and they align these cards based off of how many workers that the round allows you to have, as well as these preferences in which order they are played, and that is depicted at the bottom of these cards. And so you rearrange these cards according to the preferences for that round. You essentially just place your bidding token for the AI on the spots that are represented here. The actions that they take to represent each spot is very well condensed in a fashion that just gives the opponent more points, and you don't have to do a lot of calculation or thinking. And there's also different guilds that allow for different preferences throughout the game in case of tiebreakers for preference, and so there's a lot of variability in that regard as well. So not bad at all. I really enjoyed utilizing this AI opponent, and as you could tell, once again, it wasn't as easy as it might seem at first glance, and so it provides a good challenge there. Now, for the game as a whole, I think it functioned very well. It was a very smooth playing Euro game. Once again, I found it relatively easy to pick up and play after about a half a round or a round or so of understanding the different areas of the board. Once you had a good grasp of that, then you could take your turns. I could take my turns a lot quicker than at first. And overall, strategically, I felt this game was really smart in the way that, like games games that I particularly like that have a shared common goal, which is to say, not in the sense of just getting points, but how do you get points? You usually get a lot of points if you make instruments and appeal to the patrons as well, and so on and so forth. I think if you focus on those areas, the other ways of scoring points with the public and personal objectives, performing and repairing, all of those do come into place, side by side with the main objective of creating instruments and pleasing patrons. And I felt like this game was very smart in the way that you could, in a more flexible way, achieve those goals. In case you do happen to have a spot on the board that is activated prematurely, you usually had a way to be able to mitigate that and still be able to accomplish what you want to do. Each section of the board, for example, has 2 different actions that you could activate. The main action, such as performing or acquiring a patron, or gaining some bonuses like materials and resources to use later on. And so there's never a bad action per se that you can take, only a minorly inefficient action. And the market is very smart as well. I failed to mention too that every round that passes, the cost for each of these resources, which is animal parts, wood, and metal, changes, as you can see here. And so it's a very dynamic market that fluctuates the prices of what those cost, and so that might tailor to some of your decisions that you make and how you spend your money in case you do need to acquire a lot of resources. You go through a lot of resources in this game, especially to make really good instruments, to repair them, and to hopefully acquire better instruments and better patrons who require those higher stakes to be made and fulfilled. And so I really like the flow of the resource management in this game. At first it may seem hard to do, especially with only a few workers, like 3 workers at the beginning of the game. But this game forces more workers onto you throughout the game, very much in the sense of like Everdell was another game that I thought of, where the workers that you acquire is static in the sense that you gain them at certain times during the game, and so the opportunities start to emerge and become more available to you, and so it really does pick up at the end of near the end of the game, and I really appreciated that. Now, overall, I think would I play this over Distilled? I think I would. I think Distilled is a really good game, but I think this game offers a little bit more of the decision space that I prefer in Euro games, where you do have worker placement and bidding, and so there's a little bit more of the interaction amongst other players in that sense, rather than in Distilled. You're really just accounting for yourself for the most part. You are taking cards from other players beforehand from the market, but a lot of the stuff that they do, unless they brew a certain type of beer before you do, or alcohol, really has no major impact into what you're doing. But in this game, that could definitely have a big impact if you activate a certain worker spot first, before something else, and so you have to take in a lot more of what is going on in this game to perform well. And so it feels more traditional in that sense. Is it one of those games? Is Luthier one of those games that I am thinking about a lot, in the days after playing this game? Not really, because it does fall into that more traditional style of Euro game that, aside from the worker placement and bidding action, which I have seen before in games like Rurik, it doesn't feel too unique or have as much of that flavor that I'm looking for in a game that I really want to sink my teeth into. And if you have listened to the podcast and channel, you kind of know what those games are. But I think this game is really well done, and if you do really enjoy the theme of creating instruments, as well as the really nice mechanisms and how well they do mesh with the theme that is being approached in this game, I think you would really enjoy trying this game out. And you can do so on Tabletop Simulator and see if this game is right for you. So those are my first impressions of Luthier, the Art of the Instrument. Thank you for sticking around with me, and hope you consult with me in the future in another video. But until then, thank you for listening, and hope you have a great day.